All right, it is your Classic Metal Show right here on theclassicmetalshow.com. From the Standing Hampton release, that's one of my favorite tunes, that Sweet Hitchhiker, and a guy that helped write that tune and has been standing right next to Sammy Hagar, or right behind Sammy Hagar for the better part of 30 years. We've got drummer David Lauser. David, how are you, man?
Oh, I'm doing really well, and I'm impressed. You're not just being nice to me with Sweet Hitchhiker, are you? I mean, come on.
Dude, it is one of my favorite tunes that you guys ever did. I'll say it right up front. I am an absolute Sammy Hagar honk when it comes to music. Everything from his era of Van Halen is my favorite era, and love the solo stuff, love the Waboritas stuff. You know, I'm as hardcore a fan as it comes, man. I'll tell you a quick story real quick. I know you told me that you like to talk. Well, I'll talk a little here. I first saw you perform with Sammy when I was 15 years old, and it was you guys and Crocus at Music Hall in Cleveland, Ohio, 1.5 billion years ago. And the thing I remember most about it was I have, and I still have it here somewhere at the house, I have the T-shirt from that tour, and it's a picture of, it's like a drawing, a bad drawing of Sammy and you. Like you're playing drums and Sammy's you know, singing and playing guitar, but it just looks like caricatures. It's before T-shirts were refined, so to speak. So that is my first
Chris,
memory, man.
I'd hate to inform you this late in the day, but I think you got a bootleg T-shirt. I think somebody ripped you off.
I may very well have, man. I was a young kid at the time. I probably was like, yeah, there it is.
They sent out the patrol to you know, like to circle the venue to make sure nobody was doing that to people, but evidently they got to you.
They must have got me. That's funny.
I remember that tour with Crocus. I'll tell you a short story about that, so that I do remember. The drum tech for the drummer in Crocus, which that band was interesting. I think the singer was a guy from, of all things, Malta, so he was Maltese. Okay. You know. And he was a real character. But was that the Standing Hampton tour, or was that Three Lock Box?
That would have been VOA, actually. It was 84.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, good. Okay. See, it is kind of a blur for me. But,
sure.
I met, there was a guy on that tour that was the tech for the drummer, who you know, obviously there were some European guys in that band, Malta, and the tech was a guy named Rob Kern, who later went on, we become really good friends. He later went on to be Alex Van Halen's drum tech from Crocus. And because Sammy befriended Rob in Van Halen, when we formed our band, the Wabos, well, it was actually, you know, we weren't called anything at that time. We were just the band. Mm-hmm. But in 1997, Sam actually gave Rob Kern the opportunity to be his production manager, which was a pretty heavy responsibility. I remember Rob Kern in rehearsal with his laptop, like trying to download stuff, you know, because at that time a lot of people were still old school, and they used a briefcase and a pen and pencil.
Sure.
But he was on top of it, right? And being Swiss, you know, he was pretty organized. But it's just kind of funny. I think back at that tour, here's this young guy in the trenches with this drummer. And now he's like probably, you know, like a first call production manager. He's done Van Halen, Journey, Christina Aguilar. So I'm really giving Rob Kern some props. So if he hears this, he better call me.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Well, dude, obviously, man, you have had a very long career, you know, running with, you know, obviously, most notably with Sammy Hagar, and lots of ups that come with that. I mean, certainly Sammy has had just an amazingly long and successful career. So why don't we start a little bit with the music before we get into the other stuff? You know, with being in a band that's been successful for that long, is it still exciting to play the gigs? I know Sammy's kind of transformed himself into more of a party rock guy from the earlier Red Rocker days, but is it still exciting for you to, you know, to get out there and to play and to, you know, and to kind of grow and more or less mature musically, you know, from start till now?
Well, I'll answer that. There's like probably three levels to that, or three ways I'll comment that. But the answer is yes. And if you could bookmark that for me, because I tend to digress when I get when I like speaking with people about this stuff. So
sure.
Bookmark that. Let me just say, Standing Hampton is by far my most favorite album, and I'm not going to say that Sweet Hitchhiker is my favorite cut, but it's definitely one of them. So thank you for that plug.
Sure.
and that was my first record, and when I say record, I mean with a bona fide artist and producer and record company. Before that, I was just in bands trying to get a record deal and struggling like a lot of people. Mm-hmm. To do a record of that stature on Geffen Records with Keith Olsen producing, and with Sammy, who'd already been doing it for, I think at least 10 years as a solo artist, and with Montrose. So I was quite nervous and quite excited. Now, leading to the bookmark, do I still get excited when we do shows after all these years? We just did a show in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and and for the life of me, this band's going to be upset, but there was a band that opened for us, a really good band, really young guys. I think one guy was 15. Okay. And, forgive me, band, for not remembering your name, but I meet a lot of people, and I'm getting older. But anyway, they asked me, oh, I know what it was. The drummer or somebody in the band was saying, wow, I'm really nervous. And I said, hey, that's okay. I said to him, before you get on stage, if you're not nervous, that's a bad sign.
Right. In
other words, you're becoming jaded, or it's becoming rote or routine. So basically, I don't get as nervous as I used to, but I definitely get a little nervous before a show. I pace, I stretch, I warm up, and I definitely, more than that, I get excited. It's like the last gigs we did probably were some of the most fun gigs for me, and when I said there was a multi-fold answer to this, and I'm not trying to parlay this, believe me, but because of my wife's condition and the situation we've been going through, for lack of better terms, I guess it's like the new millennium thing, the saying, it's being present. I really feel like emotionally and just consciously I'm very present. So in the moment, like a lot of times if you're on tour, the third or fourth or fifth show, it's a little rote. Not completely, but maybe you didn't get enough sleep. Maybe you partied with a guy named Chris the night before and got a little bit too much, But the thing is like every show we did this summer and fall, I feel like, number one, the band kicked ass, and without pumping myself too much or sucking vibes, as my bass player accuses me of, I think I played better than I ever have, and I think a lot of it had to do with just because of my situation, getting on stage and the pure joy of the music really hit me. It was like, I don't want to say it was an escape, but it was like I got into it really deep. So to answer your question, the short answer is yes. I still, every time I play One Way to Rock, I get chills. Every time Sammy turns around to me and says, suckers walk, money talks, or whatever, my fur goes up.
Right.
So honestly, I'm like a little kid. I mean, my wife laughs at me. I have a drum set. We recently moved, and that's another story. But for a long time, I had a studio at my house, and I would literally walk into that studio and see the drums set up and be like a little kid, just put a smile on my face. So I am definitely still hungry and horny to play.
Very nice, man. Is it different now? Especially, I'll point to the last record, to Living It Up, which is as far away from Standing Hampton or VOA or whatever as you could probably go. It's such a chill record, if nothing else. I mean, is it kind of cool to, as you get older, to see the music evolving with you?
Well, yeah. Well, the thing is, what your question evokes this thought in my mind. I knew Sammy before I joined his band professionally. When I say professionally, I mean, like Stanley Hampton on a pro rock star record industry touring level. I never really toured before that record. I was kind of a late bloomer. I won't get into dates and ages right now, but I wasn't a spring chicken when I did that. I wasn't like 20 years old. But I knew Sam when, before he was in Montrose, and I knew we were in touch through his whole Montrose/solo career, and he always was diverse. If you go back to those early Capitol records, he did Donovan tunes. If you ever heard of that guy, I don't know if any of the listeners are hip to that. Mellow Yellow.
Right.
I guess that's one of the big
biggies,
hits.
Right.
But anyway, he really had a diverse taste. Like when we were kids, we listened to Procol Harum as well as Jimi Hendrix and the Cream, and we'd also listen to like heavy folk music, people that were like Mimi Farina and stuff like that, just sort of underground people. So it didn't surprise me as when one gets more successful, you get a little bit more latitude of what you want to do. So it isn't like he's got to sell 1 million records to pay the bills,
Right.
So he, in a way, he's earned his right, and a lot of people do this to kind of like do what you feel like doing instead of what the record company dictates. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but when I record a song, I'll put it like this as a drummer. If Sammy comes to me with a song that sounds like it's from a country artist, or if it sounds like a Black Sabbath tune, I put on my work hat and my drummer hat, and I just tune into it. Maybe I'm sort of a chameleon. I think all good musicians are, but I definitely go into I just focus on what the song is and try to interpret it as best as I can, honestly. So it's fun for me, whether it's Sweet Hitchhiker or The Way We Live,
David, people that have, that are aware of you and certainly are aware of Sammy, would think that everybody in that world living the life everybody would want to live. You're out making music, you're having fun, you're, 30-year career without having to sit in a cubicle. But unlike, or very much like everybody else, the real world comes crashing into your life. And for you specifically, it has come crashing into your life in a very, very big way, with your wife, Liza. And, it's one of the main reasons that, we're talking today is to try and help get some awareness for this project that you're working on with her. So why don't you talk a little bit about, what happened with Liza and what's going on with her and how, the foundation that you're working toward, or the fundraising campaign rather, is has come to be and kind of start defining that for people.
Well, let me work backwards, and I really appreciate, first of all, people like you make a difference in people's lives. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, outside of you and me hanging at the bar, I haven't been in touch with you since then.
Right, sure.
The fact that you've reached out and some of your other peers, I won't go into names and websites, but as you know, there's already a couple things out there online, rock magazine, Ultimate Classic Rock, and that stuff. Those guys came to me. I didn't go to them. They looked me up. You looked me up, so thank you for that.
Sure.
Let me see if I can work backwards. First of all, there's two things that we're dealing with. The fundraising thing is really kicked in hard. It saved us, well, let's just say it paid for probably, I want to say 60%, maybe 70% of all the bills that we've incurred since Liza was diagnosed. And when I say bills, I mean, we went and got fifth opinions because she has a rare tumor. The doctors admitted at first they didn't know what was going on. They knew it was a tumor. They knew it was life-threatening, but they weren't sure. So we went. In fact, I went to your lovely city. We went to the Cleveland Clinic.
Right.
That was one of our first stops. Well, a lot of that stuff. First of all, to travel the United States, and I want to stick on this Give Forward thing for a second, because I want to thank the people that have donated. and I want to explain just briefly where this money has gone. And it isn't like we're just, paying the rent with it,
Right.
So it's like when someone tells you you have 6 months to a year to live, and they don't quite know what it is, and your insurance company isn't going to pay for a second or third or fourth opinion. Like, we have Kaiser Permanente, which I'm not knocking. It's they care about people. There's millions of families that have it, but their expertise isn't necessarily rare cancer.
Right. Well, sure.
I mean, that's why there's the UCSFs, the Dukes, the Cedars-Sinai. I know them all. The Cleveland Clinics and the Johns Hopkins. If I leave anybody out, MD Anderson. I've been to them all. We've been to them all. I know them all. I know some of these doctors on a first-name basis. So we literally started going down the list, and we, if you think about it, if you book a round-trip ticket to Cleveland or New York from San Francisco in 3 days, what do you think that ticket's going to cost?
That's going to be $2,000.
You're good.
Right.
So round-trip tickets at the last minute, hotels, rent-a-cars, let alone the consultation fees. So we did that about 6 or 7 times about $2,500. I'm not, just looking for what this was and what we could do was well into 20 grand. I mean,
Sure.
Some of the flights were a lot more expensive than 2,000. But whatever, we did it. I said, hey, we got this money. I have the money. We're doing it. We're going for it. The other thing is in the meantime, and this is no slam against the AMA or doctors or whatever, but my mother was a nurse for like over 40 years. I have a great respect for people in that business. I've known doctors as a kid. When I was little, I used to read the books. I actually fantasized on being a doctor, but somebody gave me a pair of drumsticks. So doctors don't know everything. People don't, and they don't profess to. Some maybe are more egotistical than others. They mean well, but that's why people get a second opinion, or a third opinion, because you want to get as much information as possible. So, the reality is we also looked into alternative things, because if somebody says to you, there's no cure, do you stop there? Some people do. Some people just take the morphine and lay in their bed, and then their family comes and they say goodbye.
Sure.
When I say morphine, I'm talking hospice. Like when I don't want to bum too many people out here, because I'm happy. I'm grateful for my life, and frankly, Liza is way more cheerful than me about this, and she's the one that's in the shoes.
Sure.
When I say cheerful, I mean positive. She's trying hard. But anyway, so I wanted to just point out that the Give Forward site has really been a fantastic vehicle. Although we've been financially strapped, that made it way easier. It made it I can't stress how much that is helping and has helped.
Sure.
And I will make one other note, and you're not asking me this, but you say I've been, never been in a cubicle or whatever. Well, I'll tell you what, in my life as a drummer, and I know there's musicians out there listening, I have been in a cubicle. In fact, I've been out on the streets. I've been an electrician, a roofer, a painter. I've done office jobs. In order to be a drummer, I've done it all, because not everybody gets to play in tours and concerts. And frankly, here I go getting candid, after Sammy joined Van Halen in 1986, when he was full-fledged in that band, after a year or two, I had to find gainful employment. It was hard for me to get a gig. I had a few gigs here and there with local musicians, but overall, I took a day job. So I definitely have done it all to be a musician. You don't. For those young guys out there listening, if you think you're going to get rich and famous, get out, because the only way you're going to survive in this business, to me, is you got to have some talent and you got to love it, whether it's good or bad. In other words, thick or thin, I wanted to be a drummer. So enough on that. The other, working backwards, the thing that Liza and I are focusing on right now aside from trying to pay the bills and the doctors and all that stuff that isn't covered by insurance, is there's a change organization that we're trying to petition. We are not trying. We're petitioning the FDA to allow Liza access to an experimental drug. And the only way we're going to get that is by getting the public behind us, because it's a slow process. It could take years. In the meantime, you don't have that. We don't have a year.
Right.
So in this interview, if there's one thing I definitely would like you to do is enlighten people to that website, because that's going to help, or at least just talk about the fact that we want access to a drug that is legally being administered to people, but because Liza missed the cutoff date for the clinical trials, it's on hold. We don't get to go in. It's like we missed the boat. Yeah. Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense. It's horrible that it's like that. It's like, what? Because you missed a deadline because you didn't have, experience in this, more or less, to make sure that you get your paperwork done on time. They're going to let somebody die. That's just ridiculous.
Well, I mean, in general, you pretty much nailed it. Now, when Liza was diagnosed, and you can please keep me on track. I know I'm kind of going off on my story, but I mean, like, you asked me a simple question initially.
Sure.
And what was that question? Right.
No, just more talking about how this all came to be in your world. It's just such a shocker.
Look, let's start there. That's a good starting point. Mm-hmm. And I'll be concise, I promise. I was on the road. I forget where we were gigging, and I think it might have been in May. I forget. We were doing a Cinco de Mayo gig, or we were doing something, because usually May and October is like an annual thing for Sammy and the Wabos. We either in the birthday bash in Mexico, or in May we're like doing a Cinco de Mayo type of party thing, and then if there's a tour in between, so be it, right? So I was actually at a gig. My wife, Liza, had been, she's a really good tennis player. She won't even let me play with her. I said, come on, let me hit some balls. She's like, David. I couldn't even return her serves. I understand why. It's kind of like you don't want to play with somebody that can't even hit the ball, but, well, she hits a pretty fast serve, so it's not like I can't hit a ball, but I couldn't hit hers. So right. I'll admit to that wimpiness. So she was on the tennis court, and she come home from playing, and she's a real busy woman. She's an attorney. She had a couple businesses that she started. Smart, hardworking woman. So her one release was tennis. She loves it her whole life. She goes, wow, I was on the court today, and when the ball was tracking from a distance, I was seeing two balls. I go, wow. Now she wears contacts and doesn't have the best vision. I have really good vision, and I'm deaf. Okay. She's really got good hearing, and she's blind. Right. So we joke about that we're a good pair, right?
Right.
And it's the truth. She's got ears like a bat. But anyway, so she was telling me this, and I'm going, wow, that's weird. Maybe it's your new contacts. So that went on for a while. Then all of a sudden, this is like in March. Then in April, she's going, David, I'm starting to see two cars at a distance. Like if I'm on the freeway, way down the road, if I turn my head to the right, I'll see a car and a half. I better see the doctor. I go, man, she goes, I'm going to make an appointment. So she goes to the ophthalmologist, and they go, wow, everything looks normal. Maybe you should have some tests done. She goes, to a neural ophthalmologist, which is, a little bit more involved. They do tests, and they go, wow, it could be this, could be that, could be this. The last thing we think of is brain cancer. So sure enough, she has an MRI. I'm on the road. She calls me up. When I say the road, I'm out of town on a gig.
Sure.
And she goes, David, are you sitting down? I go, yeah. And she goes, I have a tumor in my brainstem. And I'm like, whoa, what does that mean? And like, I'm thinking to myself, thank God that they caught it early. We can do something. Then she says, it's inoperable.
Oh, geez.
And starts to explain to me, and I'm medically adept enough to know, okay, it's in a small area deep inside your brain. They can't take a knife to it. What do you do? We don't know yet. So fast forward to, like I said, from May up until now, we've seen probably every specialist in the United States of America and all the alternative specialists, people that, she's tried a number of different therapies that actually, I will say, have prolonged and suppressed the growth. We've had, here's the deal, and, I don't want to get too political on this, but the reality is that some doctors, if you tell them, well, I'm doing acupuncture, they'll laugh, or they'll go, well, that may help, but really, you need to do this. So she did a bunch of things on the side, like hyperbaric oxygen and a couple of other things, stuff that Lance Armstrong did that he said he wasn't doing,
right.
like ozone blood treatment and stuff. And the doctors, without her telling that she was doing this, she'd go in for her exam, for her next MRI, because they want to take pictures every month or two to make sure where this tumor's going, right? One doctor actually said, I won't mention names, but he goes, quote unquote, Liza, if I were you, I'd be overjoyed. This is like 3 months into this tumor. He goes, very little growth. Well, she wasn't going to rub it in his face, but we're spending like $2,000 a week on all this other stuff. Or can I say shit?
You can say whatever, sure.
Yeah. We're like spending $2,000 a week on all these things that aren't covered by insurance. And as I said before, Give Forward is helping us. I can afford $10,000 a month with all the help people have been giving us, and we're doing all these different things. She goes into this chamber that football players go into that help heal wounds quickly, and it's called hyperbaric oxygen. I don't know if you ever heard of it. Michael Jackson had one at his house.
Right.
You get in it, and it's like going in a diving bell. You have to sit there for 15 minutes, and they pressurize it, because otherwise you go into the bends, like if you skin dive, and scuba dive. And she sits in that thing for an hour, like it's like Star Trek or something. Frankly, I'd be freaked. It'd be claustrophobia city. But she's been doing that for the last 3 months. Anyway, the short of it is the doctors are going, whatever you're doing, diet, exercise, whatever the hell you're doing, keep it up, because you're keeping this thing at bay. And in the meantime, they're really pushing her to do radiation. So that's where we're at right now. We finally, she gave in to having to do radiation because she talks. Her speech is really affected. She can barely walk. She needs someone to help her at times. Thank God she can swallow and eat.
Sure.
But she's really, her walking, talking, vision, balance are seriously compromised. So she decided at this point, I've held out long enough because she wanted to give the alternative treatments a chance. She opted for the radiation. And let me just tell you this real quick. We were living in the Bay Area. Obviously, that's where Sammy's band's based out of. But for financial reasons, we rented out the house we own because I don't know where you're at in Ohio, but when the bubble burst in 2008, our property was like there was no equity.
Yeah.
So, in other words, if you sell your house, you don't get anything out of it. You just
lose it,
or you owe some money.
Right.
So I thought, okay, what do we do here? So the smart thing to do, you learn quick when you're a musician how to make money.
Right.
Yeah. So what we did was we kept. I won't go into all the details, but the bottom line is we're renting out the house we own. Somebody else is paying my mortgage pretty much.
Right.
And we're living in a condo down in Southern California. That way we can afford all of the expenses and do what we got to do. The reason I'm telling you this, aside from financial things, is the insurance we have is based out of Northern California.
Okay.
When you have this particular insurance plan, it's Kaiser's all over the United States. But in California, there's a Northern California and a Southern California. So the sort of it is this. We were going to have to, living down here, we were going to have to fly or temporarily live in another place on somebody's couch,
right,
and have her, because radiation's 5 days a week for 5 weeks or 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Go in. You have to go every day. They can't hit you all at once. They do it in increments. So here's a beautiful thing, like if people are spiritual or believe in God or just good vibes in the universe. We live in Palm Desert now, in this condo. 10 minutes from our house is one of the best and most cutting-edge radiotherapy units in the United States. I mean, it's not the only.
Mm-hmm.
So how about that?
No, that's great.
Like, if we were living up north, we wouldn't have access to as good a unit. So it's ironic that at first we're going, oh, shit, how are we going to get back up to San Francisco for 5 weeks for 10 minutes a day to get hit with the beam? What are we going to do? We started calling friends. We had so many people say, you stay in the guest bedroom. Who's going to take our dogs? Because, I didn't want to leave them in a kennel for 6 weeks. But anyway, this is a lot of information, but this really gives you an idea. When something like this happens, the rug is pulled, Chris.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
And like Liza closed all her businesses. She sold them at a loss. When I say sold, basically gave them away, to where at least, and she still had expenses. But we just cleared the slate, moved down here because we could afford it. I won't go into the how and the why of that. That's too much.
Right.
But I'm like, thank God, I can't believe that this radiotherapy place is only like 3 miles from our house.
Yeah.
Down here in Palm Springs. I'm like, so it's been like, how this affect me and how this happened. Well, finally we figured out that Liza has a DIPG tumor, which means diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma. Glioma means brain cells. Pontine is on the brain stem. It's like kind of up inside of your brain, at the top of your spinal cord. It's deep in there,
right,
at the base of your brain. Diffuse intrinsic, that basically means that the tumor, it's like kind of a spider web or an octopus. It's got a core like a tumor does, but it's got tentacles that weave in and out of the healthy tissue. Hence, you can't cut it.
Right.
They biopsy this area sometimes, but because of the position, all the doctors said, look, if we biopsy this, there's a chance we'll paralyze you. I'm talking paraplegic, quadriplegic.
Yeah.
And or kill you, or blind you, or they're straight up. They don't play games. So we couldn't do a biopsy to see if it was malignant or benign, but more than one doctor said, doesn't matter if it's benign or malignant in this area. For you, it's malignant. In other words, if for the regular public that doesn't know anything about this, if you have a cyst on your arm that you look at and go, this is kind of ugly and maybe it's cancerous, I want to cut out, I want to remove it, right? Mm-hmm. Like on your flesh.
Sure.
Well, a lot of times they'll biopsy and they'll tell you, well, it's benign, don't worry about it, but we'll cut it out anyway. Or they'll say, wow, you have carcinoma, we're going to cut it out deep so it doesn't spread into the tissue, and come back in a few months and we're going to check your bloodstream and make sure it's not spreading. Well, in Liza's case, if that wart or pimple or cyst is on your brain stem, that's why she's seeing double. It isn't because it's eating tissue or nerve endings, it's blocking the transmission of your nerve impulses. So she's slowly becoming paralyzed because this thing is growing and strangling the brain's ability to send messages to your body. That's what in layman's terms, and I'm a layman, it's what it's doing. It's like the freeway is jammed. Right. The information can't get through. So it's just a matter of time that this thing just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and she's completely paralyzed and can't swallow, possibly, it's going to be horrible if it gets to that. Sure. We're fighting that. But that's why she opted for the radiation.
Right.
To give her some time. Because let me end this with one quick thing, and then we can move on.
Sure.
The radiation, all the doctors, this is one thing that I want people to understand when we talk about the FDA. All the doctors, everybody, Cleveland Clinic, Cedars-Sinai, Duke, UCSF, MD Anderson, Johns Hopkins, did I leave anybody out? Stanford. Mm-hmm. All of them say you can live from 1 to 3 years possibly with this radiation. It will come back aggressively, and there's nothing else we can do. So once you radiate, that's it.
Right.
Basically, it's a stay of execution.
Right.
And at one point you will die. So if you don't get something in the meantime that can eradicate this, which they don't have today. So in other words, what I'm saying to you is modern medicine has no cure, period, end of conversation.
Right. Well, let me ask you, and I mean, it's not similar in the disease, but it's similar in the experience. You know, I had my father pass away in March. And he was. I'm sorry.
How old was he?
He's 69, so he was older.
That's young.
No, he was. I mean, he's young, but he wasn't. He wasn't old. I mean, he wasn't young. He wasn't 40, but you know, he was. He passed away because of he had an artificial hip, and then he got an infection, and this led to that, led to this, and it just fell apart immediately fast. Now, the question I have for you is, I know for a fact that you were just recently out gigging. When this was going on with my father, I was leveled. I couldn't do anything, except worry about that. How is it that you found the strength to go out and, be away and tour and, play gigs and whatnot? That has to be difficult, man.
Well, first of all, let me address your dad, Chris. I'm really sorry to hear that. And I never knew your father. I don't know your father. But 69, unless you have some super debilitating disease or you smoke and drink and just rack your body, by today's standards, to me, that's too young to die.
Oh, I agree.
Mm-hmm. So I'm really sorry to hear that. And frankly, one of the reasons, and I, with all due respects to your father, one reason that Liza did not want to do radiation is her uncle just passed away a few years ago. He had prostate cancer. He was radiated, and they did surgery. And guess what? Yeah. The surgery took out the prostate, but he got an infection, and that's what killed him. Mm-hmm. He got septic. He got it was so bad in his abdomen and his intestines, they couldn't do anything. They just gave him morphine and they let him die. So nothing against modern medicine, but I
it's not perfect. It's not perfect, is what it is. It's just not a perfect formula.
And I'm gonna, this may be out of, bookmark again because I want to answer your question. Please don't let me not answer it.
Okay.
But one thing the FDA and the other agencies that are fighting Liza getting this experimental drug, they say, well, we're not so sure how safe it is, or we don't know what the side effects. And I'm saying to myself, you don't know what you want to find out more data on the side effects of a drug that maybe gives people hypertension, and you're going to let them take Timidor or do radiation that could fry your brain and make you blind and paralyzed? It's really crazy.
Yeah.
It's like it's political. It's such a bullshit, bureaucratic way to protect people's patents and monies. I mean, how many times do you turn the TV on? Lately, last night I think I counted 30 commercials. I watched a movie.
Right.
Down here I don't have TiVo, so either I mute the TV or I watch the commercial, right?
Right, sure.
There was I would say 15 different ads for nervous leg syndrome.
Right.
Bowel. I don't know what there was like how to get a hard on, like
right.
Cialis or what it's called.
Right, Viagra.
And then they list the side effects: suicidal thoughts, nausea.
Right.
It was almost the first time I heard this stuff from a distance in the kitchen a few years ago. I thought Saturday Night Live was on, and they were doing a spoof on medicine.
Right.
It's like, yes, this could make your love life better. Side effects: if you experience suicidal thoughts, vomiting, blindness, liver disease. I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
Right. Talk
to your doctor to see if you are an advocate. So, the reality is your dad went under the knife, and more than there's people, doctors and hospitals are human. They're not perfect. They don't do it on purpose, but shit happens,
right?
And whatever. Okay, enough on that. Cause
hold on, because I wanna address that real quick. And this is outside of even my dad, but I'll tell you, back 20 years ago now, I was in an industrial accident. I was working on a steel mill, and the furnace blew up, and I got burned up really a lot, like 69%, 52% third degree.
Oh,
so,
man.
I mean, I went through it. And, the doctors came in one day and said, well, we're for sure going to have to cut off your arm at the elbow, and we're for sure going to cut off your pinkies. And if you work really hard, you might someday be able to walk with one of those prong canes, whatever those are called.
Yeah.
And I just kind of looked at it and I was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. And I remember telling, my wife, I was like, no, I was like, if you give them permission to do this, I'm never going to let you forget it. And I didn't, and they didn't, I still have all my fingers in my arm and I walk fine and, I'm perfectly healthy. But my point is that doctors tend to, and I'm sure you're seeing this right now, doctors will always give you the advice based on the lowest common denominator, the person that's willing to do the least amount of work and the person that's not willing to do anything and everything to get better. In my personal case, I did everything to get better. I worked, I was in rehab 6 days a week, 14 months, 10 hours a day, going until
I hate to say it, Chris. Hats off to you. Fantastic. I'm glad you told me this. That's amazing.
Yeah,
I mean, what you're saying here is exactly on point with what Liza's trying to do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little different, obviously, the situation.
But
but like you said, the lowest common denominator, the easiest thing. Now, here's me going a little political, and I'm bipartisan or nonpartisan or whatever. I vote for who I think is good. I'm not forget parties.
Right.
I know we have whatever. The doctors that wanted to do all that, I hate to say it, but they're not going to get paid for that surgery they would have done.
True.
And the insurance company now is paying the rehab people and stuff. So, I mean, the money goes somewhere. But the reality is I'm not saying your doctor wanted to amputate to make some money, but you gotta like, if that's his expertise and that's like the easiest and quickest and safest thing to do, of course they're going to go there. I'm going to tell you a quick story that's going to corroborate your story, and this is the truth. I don't remember the doctor's name because it was too long ago, but I lived in Southern California. That's how me and Sammy met. I was in Riverside, California, playing at the nightclub with Sammy Hagar. Well, he was Sam to me then, and we were in a band called the Justice Brothers.
Sure.
Well, anyway, long story short, you know where your lymph glands are in your throat. Like when you get a cold, your glands swell, right? You also have glands in your armpits. When women get breast cancer, that lymph gland is usually, they remove that as well as the breast for a mastectomy. Then also, Mother Nature has lymph glands in your groin, near your junk.
Right.
So I had this lump on the right side of my groin, and I was like in my early 20s or whatever. I was 20. I don't know what I was. I was young.
Right.
Down in San Bernardino, Riverside, and I went into the clinic because I didn't have insurance or whatever. I had food stamps. We were poor,
Sure.
Sammy and I both were on food stamps back in those days. You probably don't like to admit that, but it's the truth. We were
Sure.
starving musicians.
Right.
So check it out. I go in. 2 doctors are there. At the time, they probably were like in their early 30s. They were fresh out of school, and they examined me, and they go, "Oh, wow, you have a cyst there." He goes, "We can remove that. We can do a local. We can numb it here and cut that out for you right now." And I'm like, "Wow, what do you think it is? We don't really know, but we can open you up and look at it and take it out."
Right.
Well, because of my mother's nursing and because of just me, I trust my gut, I thought, my first experience with a second opinion. I go, fuck this. I'm going to go to Riverside General, and I'm going to walk in there, and I'll pay the money. So I go in there, and the guy looks at me and goes, oh, you have an infection. He goes, you need to take this or that. He goes, how many girls you been sleeping with? Whatever. I won't go there. But I was fooling around, right?
Yeah, sure.
And I caught an infection. I remember the drug I took. Some of the women are out there will probably know what this is. It's called Flagyl, and it tastes like metal. And if you drink alcohol behind it, you get sick as a dog. I had to take it for like 2 weeks. Oof. And my cyst went away. He told me that my lymph node gland was swollen because my body was trying to fight the infection. And had I just jumped, had I been the sheep and said, go for it, he would cut out my lymph node.
Yeah.
So I'll never forget that. I always remember, Jesus, if I was just the unsuspecting, yes, sir, yes, doctor, but I'm stubborn. I went, fuck that. I ain't going to get, I was scared of the knife is what me wanted to get. It wasn't that I disbelieved him. I just didn't want to get cut.
Yeah.
Well, so I hear you 100%. You know what? Congratulations. I'm glad to hear you survived that, for Christ's sake.
I'm a tough guy.
What's your birth sign, dude?
What's that?
What's your birth sign?
Scorpio.
I'm a Pisces. We're water signs, dude.
There you go. Very cool, man. Well, I'll tell you what, David. Let's get to the real important piece of this, which is how people can actually help. I mean, Give Forward is a great organization, and they're definitely helping you guys out. And the web address, unless I'm wrong, is giveforward.com/fundraiser/LJ92, and I will put all this on the website, but it's /LJ92/Project Liza, or you can just go to giveforward.com and type in Liza, and it's the first one that comes up.
Right, Liza Cozad, because there's a couple of other Lizas on that, which kind of blew our mind. How many Lizas do you know? But
yeah, not many.
You got to make sure, if you're just Googling, if you were just to Google Give Forward, not even .com, and then you put Liza Cozad, Cozad, you'd probably get that site.
Okay.
But what you're saying is way more, that's way more direct.
Sure, absolutely.
The other one is the change, I look at it probably every day, and I can't think of it right now. So, but it's basically the petition to have the FDA allow Liza access to this experimental drug. And when I say experimental, okay, this is going slow. I think it's change.org.
Okay.
But let me...
Well, while that's pulling up on your computer, let me just ask, the obvious question that I'm sure people would ask is, if nothing else, you're associated with one of the most wealthy guys in the world. And I'm certainly not going to say, well, no, I'm not, no, hold on. I'm not going to say, well, Sammy should just pay for it or whatever like that. I get that there's, business relationships and professional relationships and friendships and all of that stuff. My question, though, is couldn't his influence somehow influence somebody to, let Liza in on this trial?
That's a really good question. In fact, Sam, I'm not going to mention names, but he has pointed me to, I believe, 2 different political sources. One in particular is a congressman, either retired or whatever. Once a congressman, always a congressman, right?
Mm-hmm, sure.
It's like the president. You're retired, but you're the president.
Right.
Or at least sir.
Right.
So a lot of people, how can I say this without like making it? Yes, the answer is Sam. He's a busy guy. He's got a lot on his plate. He's got his own, what do you call them? When you do donations, I can't even think.
Charity or whatever.
Yeah. He's got a couple. He's got like lunchbox thing for kids. He's got this thing where if people can't afford to, like one girl was in the Philippines and he flew her to California. Like his charity foundation or whatever, Hagar whatever it's called, was able to fund her getting to America to get a kidney transplant. Okay. Now, they weren't, I don't know the legality of it. It isn't like his charity funded the transplant, but they definitely helped.
Sure.
Then he's got his beach bar, Sammy's Beach Bar Grills. There's a few in like like Vegas and certain airports around the country and Hawaii. All the proceeds of that go to like needy children or whatever. And like, again, I'm really, generally speaking, I apologize to Sammy for not, I'm not really sure the mechanics of it.
Mm-hmm.
I just do the gig,
Well, yeah.
I'm a drummer, for Christ's sake, In the last few months, I've learned a little bit about brain tumors, but aside from that, I like drums and I like to eat. But anyway, so yes, he has, and in fact, Liza, of all, she has contacts up the wazoo. Mm-hmm. She's an attorney. We have contacts in the tennis world. I don't know if you ever heard of a guy named Tim Gullickson. He died of a brain tumor. He was Pete Sampras' coach.
Okay.
Pete Sampras, I think anybody out there who's ever heard of tennis knows who Pete Sampras is.
Sure.
And his coach, who has a twin brother named Tom, which is kind of interesting. You got twins, identical twins. One dies of a brain tumor, one doesn't have cancer. Wow. Kind of makes, when you think of that, you go, wow, how did that happen? It's not genetic, obviously, or whatever. Anyway, she just visited us with her new husband, spent a couple days here just to support Liza and come out and just give us some love. She's putting us in touch with, and her husband, with Congress people and influential people. So the bottom line is this. The FDA, I mean, if I knew Barack Obama personally, I might have a better shot,
Right.
But it's difficult. And here's the deal, and people are going to look at this, maybe I should just come forward. The treatment that she wants, we've narrowed it down. She's an attorney. She's smart. She can barely type right now, but she can think. She has all her faculties, mm-hmm. and she's online constantly when she's not in therapy or just trying to live. She's been researching, and she knows every freaking case, she's read like 15 books on this, like from doctors to proponents. She's read the pros and cons. This stuff is called anti-neoplastons. There's a Polish doctor that came to our country 30 years ago. He's been on Oprah, Sally Jesse Raphael, Dr. Oz, who else? Larry King. I forget who, like all the talk shows he's been on. He has a documentary out. He's had two out. One's called just Krasinski movie, Cancer is Serious Business. If anybody watches this, it's on YouTube. If you want to put that up,
sure.
That would really help. I think if anything, if Liza dies and we educate people that the system is failing us, at least she won't be dying in vain. And I don't want to sound fatalistic or dramatic, but that's the truth.
Yeah.
If she passes away because she doesn't get access to this, and even if she does get access and dies, I think people should be enlightened to the fact that there's a bureaucracy out there that really needs some change, And there's so many political things out there, like food, mm-hmm. and like should they put how many saturated fats, or the FDA is working on warning the America about saturated fats in food. Christ, I mean, I don't want to bum anybody out, but I guarantee our grandchildren are going to be reading things like, yeah, your grandparents used to drink soda pop, Cokes and Pepsis.
Huh?
They figured out it was killing people. Now it's going to be like cigarettes,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not like some liberal, bleeding heart conspiracy theorist,
right.
But I know this much. My wife is being stopped.
Yeah.
The doctors admit three things. Here's the criteria to get what they call an emergency access to a drug that isn't on the market yet. One, you have to have, an incurable disease. Yes, she does.
Okay.
Two, you have to have the lab that has this drug has to allow you access. They will. And I forget the third thing. I'm blanking here, but believe me, she fits all three criteria.
Yeah, but she doesn't fit the fourth thing, which is that to know the right person in the right place to actually put the drug in her hand.
You know, I got to tell you, out of all the people that interviewed me, and I'm not just kissing ass here, you are on point, brother. You get it.
Because I've walked it, man. I mean, not cancer, but I've walked it.
We have to get together, and this is no bullshit. The next time I'm even near Cleveland, if you don't email me and get together, I'm gonna be pissed off.
All right.
And you know, the next time, I'm sure we're gonna gig again. And I don't think Sammy's gonna retire. He's too stubborn and he's too high energy.
Right.
But we go to Cleveland a lot, and if for any reason I'm even near you, we're getting together. And I don't know if you drink or not. But let's have a
yes.
drink, you know. But yes, exactly. So yes, Sammy has given me names. He's not an expert in these areas. I don't expect him to bone up on what we're going through. He just says, "Hey, bro, how you doing? Any news from the congressman?" I say, I appreciate that. No news.
Right.
I can't twist their arms. But a lot of people are afraid. So this doctor, I'm going to say his name, it's Brzezinski. The FDA, if you read anything about this guy that's not biased, they have been hammering. They've been trying to bury this guy for 20 years. Mm-hmm. He has cured people. I'm going to mention some names now. I'm going to mention one. There's a guy in the Bay Area who I met. His name is Anthony Stout, or Trout. I'm sorry. I may be screwing up his name now. I'm so hyper right now. Anyway, he's a hip hop artist in the Bay Area. His son has Liza's tumor. It's a childhood prevalent tumor. In other words, Liza, the doctors say, you have a childhood brainstem glioma. In other words, it's rare for someone that's in their 40s. They figured out that 20 people, 20, get this in the United States. What was it, 400 million people? I don't know.
Yeah, 300, yeah.
Yeah, whatever. 20 out of that many people get this tumor. So that's why the doctors were scratching their heads, and that's why we spent 3 months trying to figure it out exactly what it was. So this little boy has his tumor, Noah. He's online. He was treated at UCSF, high-end hospital. I can't mention the doctors' names. These doctors, now I'm going to say this on the air, they admit, I don't want to get Anthony in trouble, but Noah was in the clinical trials before the FDA decided to put a halt to them for paperwork, right? Mm-hmm. So he is on them today. He's outlived his prognosis by 2 years. Let me point something out to the listeners on this. When you're little and you break a bone or get a cut, you heal pretty quick, right?
Right.
The cells are like 100 times faster rate growth than an adult. That's a pro and that's a con. In little kids that get this tumor, they're lucky to live 6 months because of that fact.
Sure.
Because Liza's 46 years old. Uh-oh, I told the people how old she is. She doesn't care about that. Her tumor is at a slower rate. I theorize. That's my guess. Because her body does not reproduce cells as quickly as an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old. The other thing that's connected with this is children between 7 and 12 are going through a hormonal change. They're approaching puberty, right? Mm-hmm. Liza was premenopausal. She still has her period, but because of that, and her hormones are really imbalanced. She went and had a test, a panel.
Sure.
You know, like how women have PMS. I don't know if you're married or not, but PMS is scary, brother.
Yep.
Any guy out there knows what that 3 days is like before they get their period or whatever it is. Well, Liza's was pretty scary. Anyway, you know, I'm not saying this is the reason, but I'm sure hormones have something to do with it because of the children and because of whatever. Maybe not. But this boy I'm in touch with the father. He's getting the drug that we want Liza to get. Now, what does that tell you? Mm-hmm. I think about it. He's allowed to get the drug. Yeah. It's past phase 1 and phase 2. What that means, I've learned all this. Phase 1 means is it safe. Phase 2 means is it effective? Does it work? So if we're to get to phase 3, which means is when they do a control and compare it with standard therapy, they go, okay, this person had radiation, this person got anti-neoplastons. How do they fare? In those tests, they pulled the plug. So Liza missed the boat by a year or whatever. I don't know exactly what year they cut it off. It was sometime in 2012, I think. Had she gotten her tumor, let's say, 6 months earlier, she might be getting the drug.
Yeah.
So, to me, I don't have to be a scientist to figure out, even if the fucking drug only has a 27% cure rate, nothing in the AMA cure, it's a 0%.
Yeah.
So what, will you roll the dice on 27?
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Well, that's it. Dude, they should take the shot. I mean, if everything matches up except for the start date, you know, all right, make a waiver. There's not even a financial problem for them making a waiver. It's not like they lose anything by making a waiver. The only I'll tell you where you're stuck, and you're stuck simply in the bureaucratic bullshit that they have out there to say, well, this is the start and this is the end, and if we give you this exception, then what do we do for the next person? But it's bullshit.
Well, you're 100% on point. What baffles me logically is, I know the pharmaceutical companies, basically fund the FDA. I mean, money talks, suckers walk, right?
Right.
Sammy nailed it on that one.
Right.
The thing is this, is without getting into a conspiracy or pointing fingers or getting political, 20 people in the United States get this fucking tumor.
Right.
How's that going to hurt business? I'd sign a gag waiver. I would say, like, if you give my wife this drug, I will incriminate myself if I talk about it.
Yeah.
And let me just say this along those lines. I think I'm pretty accurate. I don't want to piss anybody off, so maybe I know somebody that's getting this drug that their doctors will not admit publicly that it's working.
Mm-hmm. I believe that.
I don't like conspiracy theories. When people send me emails about 9/11 or Kennedy, I'm not Kennedy anymore, but 9/11, there's all those conspiracy theories.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, and we will never know exactly all that happened, but give me a break. So I don't think there's somebody in an office like going, ha 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 ha, I'm killing people, or
right.
We're just, But the reality is, the system is like, I mean, this is what I learned politically about the FDA. In 2004, I believe, they expedited, maybe I got the year wrong, but for people that were going to die, in other words, people like my wife, they expedited the emergency access to experimental drugs from 2 years to 6 months. In other words, they'd let tests go for 6 months before they'd go, okay, you can have the drug, instead of 2 years, because people were dying from AIDS. AIDS, the lobbyists, the people, all the actors and musicians and good people that wanted to save people that had AIDS, that were not allowed certain drugs that were proven to work or whatever the case, whether they worked or not, these people were going to die, so they're like going, look, I'm going to die. Let me have a shot. It's going to kill me. Who gives a shit?
Right. No.
So they actually changed the law that was in place.
Mm-hmm.
So there is, like somebody in Congress, somebody has a brain and realized, wait a minute, sure you're protecting the American public from salmonella, but,
mm-hmm.
We're not talking about putting this on the shelves. We're talking about letting a human being go into a lab and hooking her up to a IV and see if it works.
Yeah. And you know what? And I'm sure right off the top, you're willing to take the risk that it doesn't. I mean, honestly. And I know that's the big fear that the doctors will always have is, well, if it doesn't work, you're going to sue me and blah, blah, blah. But, you can always waiver your way out of that to, at least take the chance.
Your story about your burn, which is amazing, a fucking amazing story. Now that I can swear, I can really talk like I talk. Hi, people. Hey, fans, how you doing out there? Check it out. People, imagine if the tables were turned and they said, no, our insurance will not allow you not to be amputated.
Yeah.
If you have to leave the hospital and you have to pay for that, not only do you have to pay for the therapy and all that, and I know what you went through. Mm-hmm. I know what burn victims go through. It's horrible. I mean, you got to scrub that skin down.
Yeah.
It's a motherfucker.
Mm-hmm.
Richard Pryor talked about that. It freaked me out. I couldn't even almost listen. And imagine then on top of you paying for it, my brother, they're saying you got to go to Mexico or Japan or China to get the therapy.
Oh, I know. It's crazy.
Yeah. So, again, there was an article recently. My wife Liza, she's smart. She goes, David, don't give any press to this article that was out that was slamming Brzezinski. We don't want to fuel the fire. So I won't even mention. But recently there was an article in a large publication that was slamming this guy. It was so one-sided. I wrote to the editor and I said, I'll be impressed if you print my letter to the editor.
Mm-hmm.
I doubt they will, but I sent it anyway because it made me feel good.
Sure.
They talked about the safety of this ANP, antineoplastin. ANP is a drug she needs and wants. What it does is it raises sodium levels in your bloodstream, so they have to monitor that. It can cause headaches. It can cause you to feel chilled, like cold. Mm-hmm. My rebuttal to that was, water has no side effects, but it can kill you.
Right.
I mean, you're going to compare something that could give you a headache and that maybe elevates your sodium levels, and maybe 0.01% of the population might really get dangerously, maybe fatal, and it isn't because they can't fix it. It's because they allow you to administer this as an outpatient. Mm-hmm. In other words, what Liza could do if she gets this drug is for a certain period of time, she has to be in the hospital to make sure everything's good, right? Mm-hmm. Then I get to go home and I get to plug her into the tube. Right. They put what they call a port or catheter, like what people do get chemo in your chest. It goes right into your artery, right. And then you hook up a bag of the drug. It's not even a drug. Mm-hmm. You hook up the medicine, let's say.
Right.
So the bottom line is this lady this person who wrote this article was saying, this stuff is dangerous and the FDA is trying to save you and help you, and this doctor is not providing them with the correct information. There's an old saying, if something isn't poisonous, it will never pass the FDA because there's no way to gauge safety. How can you clinically prove a drug is safe or unsafe if it has no unsafe quality? In other words, you can't market it.
Right.
Like tomato juice, if they prove that tomato juice with pickles and garlic cured cancer, how in the fuck are they going to market that?
Right.
So now I'm getting political, and I apologize, but
it won't be any. Dude, that's no different than any other week on this show. I'm always political, so.
Yeah. Well, I like it. Well, then bring it on, man. I've learned so much, and I'll tell you, I have been in touch, my brother. Here I go. I'm pulling the bag off of this one. I have on my own. Isn't the internet awesome? I mean, you have the world at your fingertips.
Sure.
So I did this. The young David Lauser used to be respectful and kind of sheepish. If I needed to talk to somebody, I would start from the ground up. I would go, okay, I'll find if somebody. I'm trying to think of an example. If the telephone company shut off my phone because I missed the bill, I'd go in and speak with the secretary and I'd beg them, please, I'm sorry, I'm a poor musician. Mm-hmm. Now I reversed it. I went, fuck that. Right. I got online and I figured who was the commissioner, who the chief of staff was, who the head scientist, who the head doctor, who the head of public relations. There's like 5 people. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you who they are. Margaret Hamburg is the commissioner of the FDA. I emailed her. Lisa Barclay is the chief of staff. I've emailed her. And guess what? It took about 2 months, but she finally answered. Liza sent a letter, basically an email, pouring her guts out, saying, I cry myself to sleep, I'm losing my vision, I can barely talk, my husband's watching me decay, can you please answer the email? Not even can you give me the fucking drug.
Right.
Will you answer? So she finally answered the email. I'm not publicizing this stuff. I mean, I'm not putting the emails online and stuff yet because I'm still waiting for them to respond. They say, we appreciate your situation, so sorry to hear about your wife, we're looking in.
Yeah, well, look faster.
Yeah. So I went for the fucking throat.
Right.
I've emailed Obama, Biden, all the heads of the FDA. I won't go for the cancer people because I don't trust them. I'm sorry. I am a little paranoid there. The NCI and the American Cancer Society, that's like, you talk about bureaucracy.
Sure.
Think about all the millions that are donated to them. Where does that money go?
Yep, I agree.
It goes to the FDA and it goes to pharmaceutical companies. It doesn't go to some boutique guy in a lab figuring out some shit, you know?
No, I hear you. Well, dude, I'll tell you what, man. Why don't we do this? Why don't we, otherwise we're going to go forever. But why don't we wrap this up the best way we can, which is to give people some direction on where they need to go, and I've got it in front of me, so I'll do that. Basically, if they want to donate through Give Forward, which is a worthy cause, I have done it myself. So they can just look up Liza Cozad on giveforward.com, and it'll take you right to the page. There's about 39 days left before the deadline ends. So everybody, if you can afford, I'm not, and I'm sure you're not either. Nobody's saying you got to go do this, but if you can afford to throw a couple of bucks, whether it's $2, $5, $1, whatever, it does help. So
thing, you know what? That's one thing I want to say is, like, we're not looking. We don't expect. Some people have gone over the top. I'm like, whoa. I'm like, wow, that's fantastic. The thing is this. If this thing, we were hoping it would go viral. If people donate $1, that helps.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, I don't, I just toured. I'm not rich. I'm not going to retire on this tour.
Right.
But every penny I make outside of my living expenses goes to all the things we talked about.
Sure.
And here's the thing: if and when we get this ANP, it's not, in America, it's going to be probably between $8,000 and $9,000 a month on top of everything else. So, we may reenact the Give Forward thing on another level. I don't know. That's the family and Liza's. I don't even know anything. I don't know how to do that shit.
Right.
All I know is I'm sitting here trying to help her.
Sure.
The last thing I want to say to you, I'm going to take a chance.
All right. Well, hold on. Before you say that, though, real quick, let me give the other piece real quick to the fans out there that are listening. If you don't, even if you cannot afford to give $1, you still can go, because it costs nothing to do, and go over to change.org and again do a search for Liza Cozad, Cozad, and sign the petition to allow to tell the FDA to give her the treatment. That's it. And I'm looking at the site right now, and you need roughly 1,200 signatures. I know for a fact there's 15,000 listeners to this. So, 1,200 people. Let's put this over this weekend and, help that out.
Right on, Chris. Thank you. That really, exactly. It doesn't take, and when they sign in, it doesn't mean they're going to, their information's private. That's one thing about this organization. Yeah. They don't give your email out and stuff, whatever. But what I want to say is, you asked me initially, how can people help? And we talked about the 2.coms or whatever, the org. I'm gonna stick my neck out, and I'm gonna get on the soapbox. I would like everyone, if you could, maybe I'll email you the link, but I want people to be enlightened to this. My wife would like it. If she, like I said earlier, if Liza doesn't make it, she'd like to at least expose this bullshit bureaucracy that's stopping people. And I'd like people to be exposed to this Brzezinski documentary.
Sure.
And it's really compelling, and I'll let them be the judge.
Okay.
It's not like a Michael Moore movie. I like Michael Moore, but his stuff is a little one-sided, and this stuff presents the facts. Of course, it's pro what we want. It's pro getting people access to the drug. But when you see this thing, it's got clips of news interviews, and like it shows like the Today Show or something. It's not like some stuff that's underground.
Right.
I mean, this is real, and the reality is, the facts and figures that are on this, if you research it, if you take the time, which I don't expect people to do, it's real. It's public. What do they call it? Public domain.
Right. Sure.
So I would really like, if people don't give Liza a penny, fine. But look at this movie, and America is the greatest country on the planet. We have our faults, and now I really sound like I'm a patriot, man. My family fought in the wars.
Right.
And I have a lot of heroes Army heroes in my family. I'm not like a violent person, but I believe in the idea of America. And the reality is, money talks and suckers walk. And like sometimes if you make a loud enough noise, justice is done. I'm done.
All right. Well, you know what, then? I'll tell you what, man. I think the most appropriate way to end this interview is to play one that you played on that probably makes a little bit of sense. So why don't we end this from I Never Said Goodbye with the tune Give to Live?
I love it. I love that record. That's my second favorite.
There we go. Well, let's check it out right now. It's Sammy Hagar right here on your Classic Metal Show.